comedic character made famous by Ricky Fulton by the name of the Reverend I. M. Jolly. And he's famed because he's miserable. He can never bring himself to be upbeat or positive or optimistic. I'm afraid this caricature is the one that the SNP seem to have voluntarily adopted. It's being so cheerful, Sir Roger, that keeps them going. I know that it fits the SNP's narrative to spread doom and gloom, to talk down our country's future, but as a Scottish Conservative, I insist that our best days lie ahead as part of the United Kingdom, the world's most successful political and economic union. The SNP want to create an air of constitutional crisis, but Scotland is not buying any of that talk, Sir Roger, and people are sick and tired of the SNP's obsession with a second independence referendum. Keith Brown MSP, who was sacked last week by Nicola Sturgeon as a Cabinet Secretary for the Economy, was only recently elected Deputy Leader of the SNP, and now he claims to be focusing all of his energies to build up readiness for a campaign for a second independence referendum, as early, he says, as next April. And yet at the weekend, Andrew Wilson, the former MSP who produced the so-called Growth Commission report, the SNP's blueprint for independence, which promised only a generation of misery, said he was only interested in the softest possible form of independence, and presumably in name only, and recognised that the people of Scotland were not interested in another independence referendum. So what is important to Scotland?
Some kind of SNP plot. What is his views on the fact that the SNP, the Labour Party and the Greens and the Liberal Democrats in the Scottish Parliament also withheld consent for Brexit? Are they involved in the SNP plot?
I can only imagine the Scottish Labour and the Scottish Liberal Democrats regret deeply that they ever got into any kind of an alliance with the Scottish National Party. But I'll let them speak for themselves. It's not for me to speak for them. What is important to Scotland and the Scottish business? Well, Liz Cameron, the Chief Executive of Scottish Chambers of Commerce, said this: the ability to trade freely between the constituent parts of the United Kingdom without additional compliance measures is absolutely vital to a large proportion of businesses. And we need to see both governments cooperating in making decisions together, enabling the private sector to create jobs and grow the economy. Now, just to underpin, Sir Roger, the importance of the UK single market to Scotland, it cannot be said too often that Scotland exports 4 times as much to the rest of the United Kingdom as it does to the EU. That's £46 billion going to the UK and only £12 billion going to the EU. Of course, no one on this side is saying that trade with the rest of the European Union is not important, and it is. It's of vital importance. But because we leave the European Union, that doesn't mean we're going to cease trading in any scenario. Other countries outside of membership of the EU and the single market and the customs union trade very successfully with the countries that are currently members of the European Union. But what we do need to do is to forge a new relationship, which is deep and special, founded upon the principles of free and fair trade. And this will inevitably include an arrangement on customs, but only in the minds of the obsessive and negative SNP is the answer to leaving the EU to break up a union which is 4 times more valuable to Scotland. And as has already been said by my honourable friend, just last week we saw that UK exports to India grew 31% year on year. This is just a sample of what we can achieve once we leave the EU in March 2019 and have the chance to strike our own trade deals. And my honourable friend mentioned the Scotch Whisky Association and the opportunity there. In India, we only have 1%, Scotch imports, only 1% of the total whisky consumption in India. There's massive opportunities. So Brexit is seen by many as only a challenge. We also see it as an opportunity. Leaving the EU will give more powers to both Holyrood and Westminster, and yet we've seen little imagination and creativity at Holyrood as to how these powers will be used. Indeed, the Scottish nationalists would rather see those powers kept in Brussels, and it was mentioned earlier, why on earth would the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, reshape her cabinet and add ministers to her cabinet if it wasn't to handle increased powers? So I repeat again, Brexit, Scotland leaving the European Union, the UK leaving the European Union, needs to be treated as an opportunity. Now, I just want to mention one thing very quickly in closing, and that is, if there's one area of professional activity that can change the productivity landscape and enhance our prospects as a nation exporting to the world, it is the area of sales productivity. And we need to uplift our commercial proficiency and effectiveness in professional sales and be a nation which values its salespeople. That's something I feel very strongly about, Sir Roger. Just a few weeks ago, I had the privilege of welcoming the Secretary of State for International Trade and his ministerial team to Stirling, along with the Secretary of State for Scotland and other government officials, for the first meeting of the UK Board of Trade in Scotland for hundreds of years. And that same day, in the evening, there was a reception held in the Great Hall at Stirling Castle. The room was abuzz with anticipation and excitement for the opportunities that lie ahead for businesses in my constituency and throughout Scotland in terms of export as we leave the European Union. But, and I may have mentioned one business in closing, in Stirling we have fantastic businesses that are ready to take up the challenge of this new opportunity, including Fallen Brewing, which I'll be visiting later this week. This brewery in the town of Kippen has been exporting across the UK, and like so many other local businesses, only needs the slightest encouragement to push into significant overseas markets for British beers. A great national effort, Sir Roger, is required to sell our products and services around the world. And to summarise, I believe that the UK's, that Scotland's professional sales talent and capability will be key to a prosperous post-Brexit global Britain.